You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. The Option Block is brought to you by tastytrade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? tastytrade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. tastytrade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. Time for a little bit of the old Option Block, what the cool kids call the old OB. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE OptionsInsider.com, as well as from the network upon which so many of you folks are mainlining out there these days. A couple of things to remind you of right here at the top of the show. First off, if you like what you hear, throw some stars, a like, a comment, all that stuff at the end of the day does help new people continue to discover the content. And if you want to discover more content in your lives, well, only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Now, let's see if I can assemble them all by the magic of telephone as we are joined once again by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com, as well as by the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management. I introduce them now because it is that time, listeners. It is time for a little bit of the old 80s wrestling trivia. Here we go. All right, listeners, let's get to it. Let's have some of the fun out here this week. And you know what? We like to kick things off with high style, with a little bit of the old 80s wrestling trivia. This week's contestant, name that wrestler. I'm trying to think. I'm hard-pressed to think if we've ever done this person before. If not, it's been quite some time. And, you know, I can't even say... I mean, I traditionally think of this person as more of a mid-carder, but he did have his moments, as we will see in a second, where he was very much the main event. This person, definitely a heel for the lion's share of his career. Like a lot of wrestlers, started in the 70s, actually, as a football player. Was actually drafted, I believe, to the Saints as a fullback. Didn't last too long there, as most of them did not. Whatever drove him out, injuries, other things. Ended up on the wrestling circuit in the late 70s. In the 80s, he found his way into the WWF, where he did a little bit of face work, but he was mostly known as a heel. And then he probably had his great coming out party there, which is why I hesitate to call him a mid-carder, because he was the main event of a very seminal event, listeners. Yes, none other than WrestleMania 1, where the main event consisted of Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus a pair of other wrestlers. One of them was Roddy Piper, who we've also discussed and already discussed here on the 80s Wrestling. So, no buzzes yet for who the other person was? Do we have a buzz? Oh, there we go. TOSAW already buzzed. I thought so. All right, Mr. Uncle Mike, sir. Who was the fourth part of that main event card, and also a utility heel? Otherwise, outside of WrestleMania 1, I would probably call him a mid-card. You might dispute that. What are your thoughts on who this person was, sir?
Well, it's Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff.
Yes.
So do I have verification that that's correct first?
Yes, that is correct. Well done, sir. Yes.
Got it. Yeah, no, he was, I would say, an upper mid-carder, lower front main eventer, so to speak, in that he had a run there shortly after WrestleMania 1 with him and Hogan were friends for a while, and then they became enemies, and he was a headliner for a while. But after that, I would say, yeah, for the most part, he was a mid-carder. He was one of my favorites as a kid growing up, actually. I really liked him. I thought he was he was a great heel. If you ever want some good entertainment, there's a time to where you can do a YouTube video of him training a bunch of older women, let's just say, and they weren't skinny, and he thought he claimed he was doing them a favor, but I don't know if it would be considered very nice today. But he was definitely a great heel for that purpose.
Yes, he actually retired in '88 due to an arm injury he got while wrestling with Hogan that went untreated for a long time. He actually retired to run a bowling alley, of all things, and there was a long-standing rumor that he had died for a while, but he actually was still alive. He actually did pass away early on in the pandemic, July of 2021, so he lasted much longer than a lot of the other 80s wrestlers. Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. As we keep on rolling, are these markets wonderful? Let's find out, listeners, a little bit of the old trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block, the portion of the show where we break down what the heck is trading. I'm guessing the markets didn't like our segment about Paul Orndorff here, because in the time it took us to talk about that and kick off the show, the markets have turned slightly red. They were flirting with slightly up, about 0.1%. So, again, kind of mostly unch on the day. Now, as we're kicking off this part of the show, we're off about 0.1%. So we have swung ever so slightly to the red. But, again, after the week that was last week, just monster, mother of all rallies, call it what you will out there. Not surprising. Maybe we see a little bit come back off the top. We are still north of 43.5 right now, 43.55 roughly, as we're coming into this segment. So, again, we were threatening 4,100 in the wrong direction not too long ago. So 200-odd handles, 250-odd handles to the upside, listeners. Not surprising if they maybe shave some of that off out there today. But all that coming a long way around to saying VIX right now hanging out at about exactly a 15 when we kicked off the show. Puts it down about a point from where it was on the Thursday show. VVIX at about an 85, so that's also hanging out unched. VXX about 20 3/4 down a little over 1, about 1.5 points. UVXY 1320 down almost 1.5 points, about 1.4 points. SVIX threatening that 30 handle again, about 29 1/3, up 2 points. Our buddy from VolViews, Mr. Chris Sidial, he should be buying some more 35 strike calls in SVIX out there. A little bit closer now than when they were when he bought them, when I think SVIX was 13, 14 when he bought them the first time. It seemed kind of absurd at the time, but a little bit more sensible now. And then UVIX 25.5 down almost 4, about 3 3/4 out there. So a lot to unpack. In case you couldn't tell, listeners, our buddy Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management joining us via the magic of telephone, that cutting edge technology that all the kids are raving about these days. Mr. Uncle Mike, if you have any other enduring memories of one Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff have at it? And then B, what's catching your eye out there in the markets today?
Yeah, good old Mr. Wonderful. He used to say Mr. Number Wonderful. I remember on the back of his trunks. It was always a kind of a catchy thing. And I think there was another segment I remember with him. Mean Gene Okerlund was interviewing him in the gym, and he was doing reps of just deadlifting 400 and just back and forth. He had the straps on. He was just picking it up, and he was pretty strong. Definitely a great weightlifter or a great bodybuilder, and he had a lot of great strength. And the other thing about him, he always did his pile drivers to where he would actually he wouldn't go down to his knees. He would always go out to and just land on and keep his legs straight and go down to his butt. And I think for a while he was considered the master of the pile driver. And so he was definitely someone who I felt was underused. I thought he could have been a lot bigger than he was, but nonetheless, he had a lot of great matches and he had some great runs. In terms of the markets themselves, looks like we have, like you had said, we are unched on the day, or pretty much unched on the day, not a ton of movement. And I think the market's just kind of taking a breath at this point in time. With that, just a few things that are catching my eye, if you will, in the market landscape. Things that are catching my eye are things that really aren't moving a lot. You know, it's a slow day when NVIDIA is only moving about $2.50, which is up on the day. So the fact that we're not getting that kind of movement on NVIDIA tells me that we are really having kind of a slow day in the marketplace today. There's really nothing sticking out, at least on my screen. I mean, Apple's up a couple bucks, not a huge move, but everything else, there's really not a lot of movement going on. The one thing that is catching my eye, though, is in the bond world. We are actually down about 0.5% in looking at IEF as well as LQD, the 7 to 10 year government treasuries, as well as the midterm corporate bonds. In that we had a little bit of we were in rally ho mode, as Mark Longo would say, after the Fed had announced that they were looking to possibly take a little bit of a pause in raising interest rates, or just having something to where they were kind of sort of a little bit hinting at possibly maybe being a little bit less hawkish or more dovish, whatever way you want to look at it. And so we rallied pretty hardcore with that from the bond world. But it looks like right now we're coming back down a little bit, not to the levels at which we were. We're still up from where it was, but it looks like there's a little bit of profit taking going on in that initial bond rally. So it'll be interesting to see how that folds out this week, and not to steal the thunder of around the block, but that's something to where just the price movement of the bonds during this week is what I'm definitely going to be watching with bated breath. That is for sure. And that's what I'm seeing right now. Not a whole lot going on at this stage.
Yeah, I'm actually distracted. That's why I love our pro members. They've already sent in to our live chat a great article about Paul Orndorff and how awesome of a wrestler he was, how awesome of an athlete he was, and he was drafted by the New Orleans Saints in 1973, and outstanding running back and track athlete at this high school. So yeah, a lot going on here. I'll have to dig into after the show. It's very distracting during the show. But thank you nonetheless. I love when our pro members dive in and bite in on the wrestling. It's always fun. Mr. Meatball, I know you've bitten in on some wrestling or two in your day. First off, what are your thoughts on the one, the only Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff? And then B, if you have time, if you can be bothered, sir, what is catching your eye in the markets today? Was
he in the Four Horsemen for a little bit, as I recall?
Wasn't that Ric Flair? Wasn't that Ric Flair and
is the Anderson brothers?
Oh, the original.
Yeah, Ric Flair, Arnold Ole Anderson, and Tully Blanchard. That was the originals, but they had some people come in. But you know what? He may have been in the later NWA years.
Yeah, I feel like the fourth member was always kind of rotating, and I feel like he had a run in the Four Horsemen. And really, outside of WrestleMania 1, his kind of main carding was done more on the WCW NWA side than on the WWF. They seem to understand his talent a little bit more. He had some good feuds, I feel like, with Lex Luger. I feel like he had a couple of feuds with Sting at some point. I think he did some good work over in WCW a lot more than WWF, because, WWF, if you weren't this like just giant muscly guy, you didn't get pushed. Paul Orndorff was just an actual athlete, but he wasn't 6'6" and 290, 300 pounds. He was just a big dude. He was 6'3", 230, 240. That wasn't really the WWF style. That was more the WCW style. WCW, NWA were always known for maybe not being as good on the gimmick side, but being way better on the wrestling side. And he was a part of, I believe, that run.
Yeah, we could do a whole show on Mr. Wonderful, the forgotten of the 80s wrestlers. We haven't even done him really on our segment until recently, so that's kind of interesting in and of itself. Mr. Meatball, anything wonderful catching your eye in these markets today after a pretty crazy, some might say wonderful week, sir?
Yeah, I mean, last week was the most violent bond rally that we've seen in years. And that was what really set off the stock market. And today, if you want to know why we started selling, your answer is the bond market started to pull back. The bonds are the dog, the stock market is the tail. And, that's part of the reason why, we've seen S&P futures pull back. We've seen the S&P pull back is because really in the last, couple hours, the bond market has started to tail off a little bit. Vol seems to probably have found a little bit of a near-term floor. You do have your, Apple, after really kind of a cruddy earnings, trying to basically recover. If you look at where it closed on Friday and where it is now, it's basically sitting where it was before earnings. We saw some bullish paper in NVIDIA and in Meta and in Google. They were all nicely green this morning. NVIDIA has now gone red on the day. Microsoft's still holding positive, but they've taken some dollars out of your Magnificent Seven. SEBO stock. Did you look at where SEBO is trading, Mark?
I did not pull it up. I will pull it up now. I know they had earnings.
100 and 1 second. I just saw $174.88.
Dang, I guess they like a little bit of vol.
All-time high. They blew the doors off of earnings. The stock is just taking off. CME rallying with it. The exchanges, let's see how ICE is doing today. ICE is the only one that's down a little bit. But, ICE, nowhere near an all-time high. In fact, it's down over the last 2 years. CME, these exchanges are starting to look like some interesting trades. CME is, looking all right, $212, about where it was a couple of years ago. But SEBO, the zero DTE phenomenon has played right into their hands, and they are absolutely crushing it. They've just gone straight up. That's kind of one that's catching my eye. And then, Mark, did I ever tell you that I thought about being a cosmetologist at one point?
No, you've neglected that story somehow.
Yeah, well, with my busy schedule, I would have had to take way too many makeup classes.
How long have you been sitting on that one?
Yeah, a while. But the reason why I mentioned that is because Ulta Cosmetic looks like it's kind of found a base after just terrible earnings. Estee Lauder starting to look a little bit better. So, some of your retail names, your beauty products, they're looking a little bit better today, maybe finding a floor.
Let's see if we can find a floor out here in terms of volume. I guess the answer is kind of yes. Well, again, it depends where you're looking once again. If you're looking for single names, that floor might be a little bit lower today after just a banger week last week. They got to take a break. Out in the indexes, though, they're still putting up some numbers, maybe not quite as robust as we've seen of late, but still impressive. In fact, let's start off in the vol space as we are wont to do, because VIX kind of defying some expectations right now. You might have assumed it would be a little bit of a sleepy day out there in VIX land, given the fact that we're kind of vacillating around. VIX not really doing a heck of a lot. Market's not really doing a heck of a lot to kick off the week. And yet VIX 563, 38,000 contracts on the tape out there today. So something's going up for decent size. Looks like the biggest trade out there right now, about 41,000 of the NOV 15 puts have gone up. So yet again, puts trading, but not enough to really break into our top 10 in any meaningful capacity on vol views. And then right behind it, we have 37,000 of the Jan 20s. So both sides of the spectrum, though not quite as crazy. I don't see any crazy upside going up out there today in VIX. It just seems like a lot of dense business going up out there today, which hence 563,000. Again, the ADV is 874. Does seem like we're going to hit that today unless things really fall off a cliff at the end of the day. Speaking of falling off a cliff, and maybe that's harsh, but certainly coming back to normal maybe is a better way to describe it for SPY. 4.3 million. This is exactly the kind of volume we would expect this time of day. 4 to 4.3 million. It's just lately it's been 5.6, 5.8 million this time of day. I mean, SPY's just been blowing the doors off. So to have a more normal day, it looks light by comparison. 4.3 million out there right now. The ADV 9.3 million. Not sure if we're going to hit that today, but we shall see. The S 1.7 million again. That's normally bangers numbers for the S. Lately we've been seeing 2.3, 2.6, 2.8 million this time of day. So 1.7 actually seems weirdly light now as well in wake of this whole zero DTE madness. Speaking of zero DTE, we'll get to our question of the week in a little bit. Should be an interesting one. Just went live a few minutes ago, listeners. The ADV 3.5 million out there in the S. So again, they are expecting some numbers out there these days. Small caps already 875,000 contracts on the tape out there in good old IWM. The ADV is 1.7 million. So IWM reaching a new paradigm for volume as well. I mean, already nearly 1 million contracts. That's usually where it tops out at on a busy day. At least it used to be. Now we're seeing 1.7 million for the ADV and small caps. Small caps, by the way, off 1.6% today. So they're giving back a lot of the goods that they got recently out there. Small caps been an interesting one to watch of late. They're moving in lockstep with the market. They're moving completely to the beat of their own drummer. It's kind of a weird one. Depends what kind of day you're getting out there. Today we're getting a lot of dark side out there in small caps. And the Qs at about exactly 2 million. The ADV 4.3. So kind of light for the Qs right now as well. But again, it was, unless it picks up out there, it was kind of a sleepy start to the week out there, which makes sense. You need a bit of a respite after just the insanity that was last week. Let's go out to single names. Is it a day that the single names have been kind of left in the dust? And the answer is kind of yeah. Cost you 155,000 contracts to break into the top 10. That's like mid-August numbers. And that gets us to our old friend Uber. Again, you know it's earnings season when names like Uber start popping in there. Uber kind of unched right now, 47 and about 2/3 off nearly a dime. They've had a range of not even a buck today, 48.30 on the upside, 47.44 on the dark side. Obviously hanging out kind of towards the lower end of that range right now. But good for the number 10 spot today, 155,000 contracts. I don't see, let's see, they have earnings tomorrow, so obviously a little bit of pre-earnings paper popping in there. Number 9, a names we've been talking about quite a bit, certainly post-contagion. Then it kind of fell off our radar for a while. Now it's last month it's been back on there in spades. It's been SoFi, trading right around $7.50 right now, off about half a buck. Good for number 9, 156,000. It's only 1,000 more contracts than Uber. But again, enough to make the top 10 today. SoFi has been on an interesting trajectory. Like got up to about $8.50 last Friday. And then now given about a buck of that back. So intriguing stuff out there in SoFi land. Of course, you know, back in the contagion days, it got much lower. It got pretty much to about a little bit shy of 5, about 4 3/4. So if you're looking for dark side, still got a ways to go there. Number 8, one of our frequent offenders now. It's Meta, 314.5, kind of unched out there today as well. Good for number 8, 172,000 contracts there. Number 7, another frequent offender again out there. It's off our list. It's on our list. These days, it's back in on mode again. This is Palantir, number 7, 259,000 contracts. Man, they lifted Palantir to some pretty impressive highs recently. They got up to about $19 on Friday, $18.96 it looks like. And did they break? Yeah, 19 exactly. They were actually this morning, 19.08. So they did get to 19, and now they're giving that up today, off nearly a buck. So they drove it up quite a bit over the past week, and now giving a buck of that back. $18 even is where Palantir is hanging out right now. 259,000 contracts. And the number 7 spot. Number 6, AMD slotting in pretty much exactly where we used to expect it. Chip Zone coming in at number 6, 302,000 contracts. This all sounds like a movie we've seen before, listeners. AMD 110 and about a half right now, off about $1.80 or 1.6%. So AMD feeling a little bit of dark side today. Will that conspire to drag the rest of the market down with it? Maybe not, because our next name going exactly the other way. It's number 5. It's Microsoft, good for 304,000 contracts, and they're up about $1.50. So AMD's losing, Microsoft's winning. 354 and about a half is where it's trading right now. Been a weird one to watch post earnings. They hated it, they loved it, they hated it, all within the span of 24 to 48 hours. Kind of fascinating, a mixed bag on this one out there if you are a Microsoft watcher. And of course, now they have sealed that deal with Activision finally, a year and a half, 2 years later. So we'll see how all that plays out as we keep on rolling. Keeping it in the tech land for number 4, it is the Amazonians. 402,000 contracts. 139 and a quarter is about where Amazon's hanging out right now, up about 70 cents or about 0.5% right now. All the headlines, Bezos moving to Miami. I mean, who really cares? But apparently, in a slow news day, everyone's all up in arms about that. As we keep on rolling to number 3, Uncle Mike was just talking about him. Actually, kind of a sleepy day for them. The other half of the chip zone / the leading end of the AI vanguard. It is NVIDIA. 560,000 contracts on the tape for them today. And the number 3 overall spot, 450 and about a half is where they're hanging out, up about 40 cents right now. Their range today, actually, it's been about a $10 range. So if you look at it from an intraday perspective, looks more impressive. Right now, it's kind of unched. I was at 449 the low, the high 459 and about a third, so over $10 range today. So hence, still not enough paper for them. 560, it's kind of a bit of a rounding error for them. Let's get out to number 2. One of the more impressive things I thought about the rally last week, because how many times have we joked on the show, listeners? The market can't rally if Apple is not rallying. The market doesn't like it when Apple is not green. Well, they rallied hard towards the end of last week, even when Apple was down, and as a Meatball alluded to, came out with some pretty garbage earnings, quite frankly. Now, they like to spin it, and they're pretty good at spinning it, but they weren't great. And yet the market continued to rally, which, again, showed surprising strength in a lot of different areas. Apple making up for that today, 178 and about a dime, up about $1.40 and change right now. Not even a full percent out there. So maybe getting back some of what they had lost post earnings. Good for number 2, 651,000. You know what number 1 is, listeners. You don't need me to tell you, but I'll do it anyway. It's Tesla. Looking pretty light for them right now as well, about 1.2 million. It's about the minimum of what we come to expect from them this time a day. Tesla 215.60, off about 4 1/3 right now, nearly 2%. So they're below 200 not too long ago now in all this rally. They got down there right before Halloween, 197 and change, and now they are back up to 215 and change out there. So that's the number 1 spot. Let's look out to the earnings front. If you want a hot week for earnings, yeah, we got another one for you, listeners. Today, not so much. Dish Networks, that gets you fired up. Hey, more power to you, but bigger names later this week. Tuesday's a big day. We got Uber, the aforementioned Uber, RIVN. They're an interesting one to watch. Maybe less so now, but we shall see. Maybe that'll turn around. Gilead, I haven't talked about them in a while. Bumble, everyone's writing puts in Bumble. We talked about it many times. Long-term put writers have been doing well out there in Bumble. eBay, TKO, haven't really had an earnings, I don't think, with them. But yeah, this is the combined WWE and UFC entity. Getting annihilated, at least they were. The rumors were Vince was dumping his stock. Let's find out more about that on Tuesday. Wednesday, Roblox, Warner Brothers Discovery. They've been a fun one to talk about on Oddities and other shows. Under Armour, some company called Disney. Not familiar with them. LYFT. Thursday, this one I'm familiar with. The much ballyhooed Oatly. Making me a fortune out there right now. We'll see. YETI and Krispy Kreme. And Friday, Stone Cold. They were just on our odd blog not too long ago with some interesting paper. If you want to see what's going on for the season yourselves, listeners, a lot to unpack. Let's look at a couple really quickly. Let's go out to Uber tomorrow before the bell. 47 3/4 is where they were when we ran this number. This report, I should say. They're pricing in 337. In the past, they've moved 363. So a little bit more juice, or I should say a little bit less juice, but not much. Bumble 1367. They're tomorrow as well. They're pricing in about $1.50. In the past, they've moved to $1.93. So looking at light juice for 2 of these right now, which is kind of interesting. That's kind of bucking the trend that we've seen out there. Gilead, 7th after the bell. 81.60 is where they were trading. They're pricing in 268. In the past, they've moved 308, so 40 cents off the top. Wow. This is interesting. This is a bit of a surprise to me because lately we've seen a lot of names pricing in more juice and then delivering. So kind of interesting. Our season is looking pretty robust right now. Here we go. Rivian, 7th after the bell. 1771 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $2.02. In the past, they moved to $1.56. So there we go. Nearly 50 cents more juice out there. Let's see. Where is RIVN hanging out right now? This one's kind of been all over the place of late out there. RIVN 1710. Man, how the mighty has fallen. All of you were looking at the 25s and I think the 30 calls recently in August expiration. We are a long way from that now, but they're pricing in about $2 right now. Extra juice in RIVN. Is it merited? I guess we'll find out. TKO, here we go. Yeah, we have no history. That's what I thought. They were almost $85 when we ran this report. They're pricing in $4 exactly. Is that light? Is that heavy? We don't know yet in TKO. So that'll be fascinating to watch that one. What's going on in the combined world of WWE and UFC? You know, they have a lot of rights deals coming up. They already signed one. Folks not exactly loving it, so we'll see what the other ones hold in store. Warner Brothers Discovery, 8th before the bell. 11 3/4 is where they were trading. They're pricing in about $1. In the past, they've moved 49 cents, so pretty much a two-banger there. Wow. That's extra juice. Warner Brothers Discovery has been an interesting one. We've talked about some fun trades on that one. It's like most of them have come up on oddities, funky risk reversals, and other things that we haven't seen a lot in other names, and they've actually worked out, it seems like, a lot of them, so... WBD 1 to watch out. They also look really quickly. Disney, 8th after the bell. $85, pretty much even is where they were when we ran this report. They were pricing in $5 about. In the past, they've moved $3.41. So, wow. About $1.40 worth of extra juice. It's $4.80 exactly what they're pricing in. So, wow. $1.40 extra juice in Disney. It's like they're pricing in a banger announcement. Let's go to AMC. They're trading 1072. They're pricing in $1.40. In the past, they moved 73 cents. So they're pricing in a 2Xer there as well. LYFT 1066. They're pricing in $1.40. In the past, they moved $1.54. So a little bit light on LYFT. We could keep going, listeners. There's so many names we have here we could talk about. Let's go to YETI really quickly. Why not? They're the 9th before the bell. 43.62 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $4.50. In the past, they've moved $3.20. So a lot of extra juice out there in YETI. Oh, how can I forget Stone Cold, our old friend Stone Cold. 10th after the bell. 10.94 is what they were trading at. They were pricing in, oh my goodness, they're pricing in 54 cents. In the past, they've moved about $1.50. So they're pricing in literally a third of what their past movements were. Wow. Have they already pre-announced effectively? I'll have to dig in and see what's afoot there. But wow, that's a lot less juice. That's A, weird for this cycle, and B, very weird for this name. So I'll have to do a little bit more invest. That's why we run these reports, listeners, so you can find little fun nuggets like this that are worth investigating. Is that just ridiculously underpriced vol? Only one way to find out, listeners. In terms of the season, that's looking pretty light when we look at the season right now. It has come in, but it's still a banger. 123% is where we're hanging out right now with 565 names reporting. That's a lot of juice. So all these names that are pricing in 10, 20, 50, 100% more juice, seems like right now at least it is kind of merited. Let's see what else we have on our radar, though, listeners. It is time to unleash the beast, known as the Eye of Sauron. It is time for the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, let's get weird. Let's get wild. Before I unleash the beast, the Meatball and company are always looking for some fun paper out there as well. First off, Mr. Meatball, does that surprise you? Stone Cold trading at a remarkable discount compared to previous movements. I know we were just talking about Stone Cold with your own unusual activity paper. And then B, anything catching your eye in the world of unusual activity right now?
Are you going to bring up ACVA?
Well, we don't have them right now. So no, let's go into it, sir. Let's dive in.
All right. ACVA, they report earnings tonight. And we've got a huge buyer of the November 12th puts. Stock doesn't look that hot, and they're just outright buying these puts. This is ACV Auctions. They're a dealer-to-dealer auction company. Don't make a lot of money, and they don't like apparently they don't like the way that earnings are lining up for later today, because they're they're backing up the truck on these puts. This is a stock that does an average daily volume of 35 contracts, 10,000 on the tape. That's more than the total open interest. And it is primarily in the November 12th puts where they have picked up 9,152 of these so far today.
Yes, now that you mentioned that, I do recall seeing that paper come across our radar this morning. A lot of put paper. I think we bumped it down to get some call paper on the. I know folks love the calls, but you're right. The puts are informative, especially when they're going up immediately before earnings. ACV auction listener, ticker symbol ACVA, trading $14.50 right now, off about a quarter on the year. A year ago, they're trading a little bit shy of $7, so they've had a banger year, pretty much doubling, up 108% on the year. Even though they are off their highs came in the May-June timeframe. It looks like about 1870, pretty close to it. June, July, around that time frame. So they shot up quite a bit this year, from a sub $7 up to about 18, almost $19. Then they've given about 5 of that back. Actually, they got down to 13 1/3 before all the massive rally last week. But seems like somebody maybe thinks this crazy palooza of upside is a wee bit overdone, listeners, because they are loading up on the 12.5 puts for size, as the Meatball alluded to. Also worth noting, these are pre-earnings puts, because ACVA has earnings tonight after the bell. So I guess we'll find out pretty quickly. Maybe even by the Thursday show, we'll be able to talk about it, whether this person was right or if they were dead wrong. They've traded 47 times their ADV right now, listeners. So there you go. That'll tell you that the game is clearly afoot out there in good old ACV. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to the upside now, listeners. I know you folks are all upside biased. You're like Uncle Mike, a bunch of degenerate upside lovers out there. Let's go to Cinemark Holdings, ticker symbol CNK. Trading right now about 15.25, off about $1.15, or a little over 7% right now. So they are coming for Cinemark. Yeah, so Cinemark beat estimates, but apparently they're not by enough. I don't know. Either way, they're coming for it today. On the year, it's been a decent year for them. 12.25 is where they were a year ago. Then they crushed it down to about 8.25. So they took quite a bit off the top. And then they rallied it again up to about $18.50 in June. Then they hovered between 18 and 16 for a while. Then they got back up to their high for the year in early October of 1985. An excellent year. Also a good high for Cinemark. Then they gave a lot of that back, got back up to about $15.50, actually 15.25 in late October. And they tried rallying it again last week up to about 16.85, and now they're coming for it again, back down to about 15.25 right now. So let's see what our Eye of Sauron found out there. Looks like somebody thinks, in spite of the fact that they have now slammed it twice just in the past couple of months, someone thinks that the upside party is back in full effect. Because they came in this morning and scooped 6,000 of the Nove 17 calls. Looks like they lifted the offer on these bad boys for 20 cents. So no messing around in this one. This is a 61 vol, if you are wondering. The stock was actually a little bit higher when they bought these, 15.53. So they've given up almost 30 cents on the stock. So that's not a good sign when you're buying out of the money calls, that the stock moves almost 30 cents against you. So that's kind of rough. Looks like, again, they just had earnings, so there's no earnings baked into this. This is just, as it appears to be, Mr. Meatball, a straight-up flyer out there. Looks like right now they've done 4,000 more, so a total of about 10,000 of these Nove 17s have traded today. Mr. Meatball, what are your thoughts? Looks like grabbing for a little bit of upside air in Cinemark today, sir.
Yeah, it's funny because it's down a decent amount today. They're I saw these go up. I don't get buying those calls for 20 cents. I think there's better ways to express your opinion. It's not like the 16 calls are that expensive. There are 16 calls are 30 cents. That's a much better play. But maybe this is going to have some out of bounds rally, or maybe it's maybe they're short stock and shorting this thing and just putting up an upside hedge, because this thing has gone basically straight down since earnings. So it could be an upside hedge against a short. That would be the one that would make the most sense on the trade. But they're actually bullish, there are much better plays than the one that they executed.
Yeah, buying them against short stock is the only way they're even remotely really palatable to me. This stock has struggled to maintain any sort of upside recently. They've come for it every time it's rallied. To just stretch and buy these calls with just if you wanted that optimistic outlook, you're right. This is not my preferred way at all. So, yeah, we'll see pretty soon how these are working out as well, but I don't love these at all. Let's keep it going. Let's go a little bit longer term, listeners. If this January doesn't do it for you, how about Jan of 2025? That's where we're playing in our next name. This is Vertex Energy Inc., ticker symbol VTNR, VTNR. So you think it might be a wine name, but nope, Vertex Energy. Trading $4.39 right now, off about 14 cents or about 3% today. On the year, as you know, the energy market's been a wee bit topsy-turvy this year. A year ago, they were trading $8.50. Then they crushed it down to $5.50 in December before rallying it to its high for the year of $11.20 on March 3rd. That was pretty much all she wrote. They pretty much crushed it all the way down to the low for the year of about $3.85. That was back in the beginning of October. It's been vacillating around this high threes, low four range pretty much ever since. So net off about 48% on the year. Obviously, much more than that from the highs it set back in March. Let's see what our eye of Sauron found out there. Seems like somebody, Mr. Meatball, looking for a little bit of upside. Now, this is an interesting one. This goes back to that question of the week we just did recently about how cheap is too cheap. A lot of you came in on the under $10 for the stock. Well, you're not going to like this one then, because someone came and scooped 5,620 of the Jan 2025 5-half calls. So out of the money calls on top of it, and they paid $1.33 for the privilege. So stock by itself, listeners, is only trading around $4.40. So, I mean, you're talking nearly a third of the value of the stock just for these calls. That's an 82 vol if you are curious. The stock was around here when they bought them. There's earnings tomorrow, so this is an interesting way to play the earnings, if that's how you're doing it, but it could certainly be one way to do it. Intriguing stuff. You know my thoughts on this, Mr. Meatball. I've always been kind of lukewarm on these massive options outlays when the stock's already sub $5. What are your thoughts on doing it? A, doing it at all. B, doing it in an out-of-the-money call as opposed to maybe a meteor call, which would be more of a stock substitution play, which you might expect. And then C, going out this long, sir. Kind of a trifecta of weirdness on this one.
Yeah, it might not be an earnings play. It could be some sort of kind of longer term deal. They do motor oil. I think this might be a spinoff from either Exxon or Chevron from back in the day. I don't fully remember, but it's an interesting one. Really curious paper. We were looking at this, Andrew and I, during our Delta Strike show, and it just, we like the company. The company looks interesting, but the trade itself, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense. I'd rather just buy the stock for $4. It's a way better play.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm not down with this one. So far, we're not crushing it here. I don't love many of these. The puts, I guess the puts are all right, but yeah, I'm not in love with most of these. Let's see if we can get out of here really quick. Let's add a fourth one just for fun, because we had 3 ready to go today anyway. We'll have the meatballs as a bonus. Let's go out to Gen Digital Inc. This is everyone's favorite multinational software company, co-headquartered in Tempe, Arizona, and Prague, Czech Republic. Huh? There you go. Everyone's favorite. Everyone loves those. Ticker symbol, what is it? Gen, G-E-N. Trading 17 1/3, off 26 cents or about $1.50 today. On the year, let's see, a year ago was trading almost $22, so they have come for this one. They're off nearly 20% on the year. They crushed it down to its lows of about 15.5 back in May, so they have rallied it since then. They got it back up to about $21 in August before taking it right back down to where it is right now, 17 1/3. It was actually trading about 16.5 a week ago, so it's actually looking a little bit loftier right now. And let's see, looks like somebody, Mr. Meatball, also looking for more upside paloozas to come in Gen Digital. They're scooping the 18s like they're going out of style. They bought 3,523 for 52.5 cents. That must have been it was one of the later prints because the rest were cheaper. They started off buying them the 18s for 35 cents. It lifted the offer about 3,000 times. Then they came in about 1,000 more for 49 cents, then 1,000 more for 50 cents, and then the balance, 3,523 for 52.5. There are earnings tomorrow before the bell. the stock was a little bit higher, 17.5, so they're not winning that battle. Mr. Meatball, what do you think? A little bit of an earnings swing for the upside fences and everyone's favorite multinational software company, Gen Digital, sir.
Yeah, this is another one that I'm not super familiar with. It's definitely curious. I've never even heard of Gen Digital. Have you?
They do cybersecurity software.
Oh, it would make some sense. I mean, the cybersecurity space, they've had a nice little run here year over year. They're still way below where they were a couple of years ago. But the cybersecurity space, definitely an interesting spot. And, I don't know why you'd go after this one, but maybe they've got a buyout coming, or maybe they're just going to crush earnings.
Yeah, they're actually in the S&P 500. It's one of these stealthier names. Definitely not one of the Magnificent Seven. You like these calls, listeners? The Nova 18s, they got earnings tomorrow. We'll find out by Thursday's show how many of these trades have fared. And we're also going to find out collectively right now what Uncle Mike has up his sleeve, because it's time for the strategy block.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the strategy block.
All right, Mr. Uncle Mike, you got about 8 minutes to hold court on the one, the only Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. Have at it, sir.
Oh, boy, I can't. I'm not even going to try with that, because I could go on for 8 hours on Paul, Mr. Wonderful Orndorff. But, the one thing I will add, though, is that Kevin from Shark Tank, he's not Mr. Wonderful. He stole his line. He stole his thing from Paul Orndorff. That's what I've thought about every time I've watched Shark Tank. I mean, be honest. Have you guys thought that too when he calls himself Mr. Wonderful?
There also was a UFC fighter who went by Mr. Wonderful too, and I always kind of thought, oh, you're ripping off the real Mr. Wonderful.
I agree. But anyway, so what I want to talk about today is doing your homework. And so I want to talk a little bit about how I do my homework before I get into a trade. Now, what I'm going to go through is how I do my homework when based upon once I've already selected the stock or the index or whatever, and I've selected a sentiment on it. So let's say that I'm bullish on XYZ stock going from $100 to $103, let's say, over a 2-month time frame. And that's what I've decided based upon the chart, based upon the stock, whatever the case may be. I've decided how much I want to risk on it. And so the way with which I like to do my homework in a situation like that is that, number one, I always start with, what if the stock goes up? What if the stock goes down? What if the stock stays the same? What is going to happen to this option strategy? Now, that kind of helps me determine where I think the best option strategy can be. So, for example, what if the stock goes up? Well, I've already done my research, and I believe the stock's going to go from 100 to 103, let's say. Okay, that's what would happen if it actually does that. And if that's the case, I would look at whether, let's say, a call option, selling a put, buying a call spread, whatever the case may be, depending on how much I want to risk. If I'm looking to have this more of a stock type play, then maybe I would do this as a covered call type of thing. If I want to just have some leverage on it, then maybe do a call spread versus a call, whatever the case may be. Or when I'm deciding between strategies, I'll say to myself, of course, like I just said, the first one, what if the stock goes up? I think it's going to go up to 103. Okay, great. This is how much money I would make on this strategy. This is how much money I would make on that strategy. Now, what if the stock stays the same? Because after all, I'm not going to be right every time. I need to ask myself those 3 questions. What if the stock goes up, down, or sideways? If it stays the same, then I could see that if I bought the stock and sold an out of the money covered call, I would still be ahead at the end because the call premium would expire worthless. However, if I believe that if it does stay the same, and I were to buy maybe a 102, 103 call spread, well, then I'm going to lose 100% of my investment, or my trade, I should say, because of the fact that all the options will expire worthless. Now, what if the stock goes down significantly? Well, if I did that covered call that I had mentioned, I would lose money on the stock and ultimately likely lose a lot of money on the trade if it went down significantly. However, if I just bought a call spread, I just have a little bit of money at risk, and I'm in a better spot if the stock were to go against me quite a bit. So with that, what if the stock goes up? How would this strategy do? What if the stock goes down? How would this strategy do? I asked myself that. Now, let's take this to the next level. If the stock were to go down, meaning if it were to go against me, could I see this the bottom falling out of this thing and having to go down to 85, 80, whatever the case may be? If that's the case, then I would probably shy away from owning the stock and selling a covered call. I would probably maybe just take a little bit of money and do a call spread if that's what I felt it was going to do if it were to go against me. How likely is it to go against me? Is this thing a coin flip? This thing's either going to go up or down. I'm either going to be right or wrong. Well, if that's the case, then maybe I need to lean towards something like just a smaller amount of money on a call spread. Do I think this stock's going to go up? But if it goes down, I really don't see it going down that much, if at all. I think it's going to be kind of boring. Well, if that's the case, then I might lean more towards buying the stock and selling a covered call against it. My point is this, folks, when you are analyzing what trade you want to do, I would recommend asking yourselves these three questions. What if the underlying goes up? What if the underlying goes down? What if the underlying stays the same? What are the benefits and consequences of each? Now, from there, I think it's important that you have a good factor or a good understanding of the 6 factors of option pricing and how they could also play a factor into it. Have that understanding, but no matter what you do with the underlying, ask yourself those 3 questions, and I think you'll be off to a good start.
And we will get off to a good end because it's time to go, listeners, around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block. A lot going on here. Looking here in our chat, someone saying, Frank1209 saying Paul Orndorff was good. He was the 5th, I think he was the 5th horseman. I'm looking here. There were a bunch of 4 horseman members, but Ric Flair is definitely one of them. I remember that. Other ones, Barry Windham, they say was in it briefly. Arn Anderson, and they say they actually rotated. It was more like 5 or 6 guys than 4. But none of them were Paul Orndorff. I think he actually battled against them. In terms of questions right now, a lot of people are saying here, Option got a good poll question this week. Looking forward to seeing what everyone else is up to with 0DTE. Yeah, it's kind of a fun one this week. Well, they're all fun, we think, but this one looking kind of interesting. We are coming up against it, so I won't have time to get into all the details from our polls from last week. But we're asking this week, everyone is obsessed with 0DTE options right now, but how are you actually using them in your trading? Give you 4 choices: income and premium harvesting, short-term speculation, short-term hedging, or you don't trade 0-day options. And right now, again, it just went live a few minutes ago, listeners. So in the early voting, it's a battle, but I don't trade 0DTE is actually winning with 44.4%. A third of you saying you like it for short-term speculation. Only 22.2% saying income or premium harvesting, and no love at all for short-term hedging. We got one of our pro members, Mr. Age. He's outspoken on his lack of love for 0DTE. He says, I was a kid who understood not to play with matches. As an adult, I don't touch 0DTE either. Clearly from these numbers, Mr. Age, you are not alone. At Options, the place to go to make your voice heard. As we go around the horn, see what everybody is keeping an eye on until the Thursday episode. Mr. Meatball, we'll start with you. What are you keeping an eye on until the Thursday show? And then, because we're coming up against it, where should folks go if they want more Meatball in their lives?
Yeah, I mean, you got to watch earnings this week. Those are going to be interesting. Watch the 10-year. It's going to tell you exactly what the market is going to do. We've got a huge amount of bond auctions this week. I believe like over $100 billion in bonds being auctioned this week. Those are going to those bond auctions that happen typically at noon Eastern time. Those are going to be market drivers. Keep an eye on them. They're big.
You sound like Uncle Mike in his Pro Q&A a couple weeks ago, talking all about the bonds. But It is hard to avoid that right now. Check them out in the land of the pit if you want to learn more, listeners. OptionPit.com. is the place to go. And Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what are you keeping an eye on until the Thursday episode, where I may or may not be in the same room as the Flowmaster? And then B, where should folks go if they want more Uncle Mike goodness?
Well, it's funny. I had a roommate in college from Oklahoma, and he said, everybody makes fun of rednecks till they need their car fixed. And I'll say this. Everybody makes fun of people who watch bonds until the Fed raises interest rates like they have. And so that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. Anyway, with that, watching the bonds, seeing how they react from this, seeing if the rally is going to hold from the last few days, or seeing if it was just a head fake, if the bonds are going down. Bonds are the most fascinating thing in town right now. I challenge anybody to say anything different on that. With that being said, if you are looking for more information on bonds, for that matter, follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW, if you're looking for a financial advisor who delves in the option product and uses it quite frequently if it's appropriate for the client, of course. Check out my website, stcharleswealth.com. Would love to have a conversation with any of our listeners. I love all of you, except that one guy, but we won't talk about him.
We won't talk about
that is all.
And listeners, so according to Uncle Mike, listeners, if you like bonds, you might be a redneck. Send your hate mail to at Mike TOSAW on Twitter, all one word over there. That's going to do it for us on the old OB today. Back in a little bit, though. Network not done, not by a long shot, listeners. A lot's been popping off in the world of crypto and crypto volatility and skew and all that madness. We had Greg and the crew on last week to break a lot of it down with us on the Crypto Rundown. Going to do more fun out there today with all the action. It is funny. Once Bitcoin starts threatening the 30K, all of a sudden people's ears start perking up, and all of a sudden they start asking, well, tell me more about these crypto things again. So a lot of fun. If you like vol, join us again tomorrow on the pro side. We'll be back later than usual because he is beaming in from Australia with the Spike's father himself, Mr. Simon Ho, back after many legal-initiated hiatuses. IATI, whatever the plural is. He is back with us to answer all of your questions. You want to talk crypto vol? You want to talk S&P vol? All of the vol. We'll talk it all with you and a whole bunch more. If you're on the pro side, get those questions in now. That should be a fun one. That's coming up tomorrow. That's 3 p.m. Central. A little bit later than our normal time because, again, he is beaming in from across the pond. Wednesday, of course, Education Wednesday, back for a little bit of the old options boot camp action. Also doing a rare Wednesday episode of TWIFO this week because, hey, our buddy Mr. Blue is beaming in. That's the only time, literally the only time he had available. So we thought, you know what, for Blue, we'll make an exception. So he's going to come on and talk about all of his crazy research in the world of futures options. So a rare Wednesday edition of good old TWIFO. So if you're on the pro, you can join us live for that. Who knows what segments we'll get into on that show. Should be a fun one. And then, of course, back again on Thursday, maybe live with the Flowmaster in the same room. We shall see for the next episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Option Block is brought to you by tastytrade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? tastytrade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. tastytrade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.